Commission for February 4th open. I will entertain a motion for approval of minutes from January 21st.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Our first public hearing is Maple Street roadway. And we'll read that into the record. Under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law is amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations, the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing for stormwater management and wetland posting at 6:30 in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by HD Ballistics Inc. for a roadway work on Maple Street. And we're open.
Thank you.
And are we going to do 63 at the same time?
I think it would make sense.
Um,
And that'll be notices all together with the,
Yep. And that being said, I'm going to read that one into the record as well, because we're going to open that as well under the
same set
Wetland
of plans, so.
Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations, and the West Bridgewater Stormwater Management Bylaw. The West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by HD Ballistics Inc. for work at 63 Maple Street. And we're open, and we have the notifications.
Greg Driscoll of Jacobs Driscoll Engineering, tonight representing MB Holistics. Mike Dreyer from MB Holistics is here tonight as well. So this is two separate filings for this project because we have not only the modifications to the existing site for the proposed use, but also improvements to the roadway. And this is required by planning board. So Maple Street, where it comes off of Pleasant Street, will be paved and improved up to the site entrance. So those are the two filings that we've made for this project. The applicant, Michael Dreyer of MD Holistics, proposes to open a new medical marijuana facility in existing building located at 63 Maple Street. This building was originally built by Mark Blassie for Blassie Masonry. That's where he had his business. He's since moved his operation out of this building, and is he down in Taunton now or something?
Bridgewater.
Okay. And has leased the building to MD Holistics. They are in the process of getting their medical marijuana licenses through the state. We have been through planning board already for the site and for the road. All their comments and requirements for the improvements of Maple Street have been integrated into the plans. And the site is located on the westerly side of 24. So this is Route 24 here. The site is located on the westerly side. This is all industrial zoned and used properties over off of Pleasant Street. Then some land owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on the opposite side of Maple Street. The site, as I stated before, has already been developed, and we have existing stormwater facilities on the site, a collection system, parking, existing septic and all that stuff, propane, and an existing stormwater management facility, stormwater basin. So in order to operate out of the site, the facility needs to be over 500 feet from a residential use, which is on the opposite side of the highway. So part of the facility, the definition of facility was the parking area as well. So what we're doing is removing the parking area and pulling the pavement and everything back out of this 500-foot zone. And that's really the just the notice of intent filing for the site portion. It's really just removing pavement, reducing impervious area. This right here was a concrete area for storage of materials for the masonry business. That's no longer there. And extra paved area. So we'll keep this catch basin right here with the paved swale up to it, so it can remain to function the way it currently is. And if anything, it'll help improve the function of the existing stormwater basin there, because there'll be less impervious area contributing to it. And as far as the roadway goes, these roadway improvements were required by the planning board, and basically what we're doing is the existing road is maybe 16, 18 feet wide. It's gravel. It's really just for access to Plassey's property. And the planning board had always wanted it to be improved above and beyond that, and that's what we'll be doing for this use. It'll be 20-foot wide paved roadway. Maple Street is an existing right-of-way in the town of West Bridgewater. It's a town road. It's gravel right now, but it's more or less a paper street. It does provide frontage to the property of 63 Maple Street. And so from Pleasant Street over, we'll be paving it. At the low points, we're going to have some stone infiltration trenches to treat and mitigate runoff from the road at these low points. We will be relocating a utility pole right in this area here, which is into the 20-foot wide right-of-way, proposed travelway. And we're going to be bringing the electric back to this pole, and then either they'll have two choices, however it works out with National Grid, to either move the pole or to go underground from there to the site. Planning board also wants us to add lighting along the road, so we'll be adding street lights to the existing 2 utility poles. And there is already, I believe, a turnaround for fire access right back in here, gravel turnaround area. There's also a gate that's set back here where a fire truck could pull in, back up, and be able to get out. So that is the overall project. We also filed a stormwater permit for the roadway, because it's over the 15,000 square feet. And that's about it.
Who's going to be paving the road? Is it?
The contractor.
Are you referring to a
It's not
designated
gonna,
contractor?
is it the contractor that's doing the property, their responsibility, or is it the town?
I believe it's your
No, it'll
responsibility.
be on.
Is it going to be considered a private way after that?
No, it's still town.
Still town?
So it's going to have to be, I'm sure the planning board will have somebody come out and look, make sure that all the work is done to the sound standards.
Even the lighting and all that stuff, you guys are going to do it all?
Yes.
Does the new building come under the new stormwater regs or not?
It's an existing building, and we're not adding or altering the building itself. We're just reducing the amount of pavement on the site.
So if you just make a sale, that doesn't now change the regs? Unless you'd have to alter the property in some way to, the 15,000 foot rule.
I think of the widening of the roadway, that's
That
why it's
would
coming under
be
the...
part of it,
yeah.
but not
Yeah.
the...
But not the site, because
Not the site.
there's only a small amount of work that's
Okay.
being proposed.
Yeah, it's around 2,000 square feet of
Okay. All
pavement
right.
area that's been removed.
That was
And cut
the
back. Okay. So that's it.
Has it been vacant long, the site?
There's been, while we've been through the permitting process
Yeah.
with all the different boards in the town, we've had Mr. Plassey's business in there as a sublet for a period of time.
Okay,
And
okay.
another use, construction use.
Yeah, there was a solar company in there, I think, when you
There
guys first
was,
started.
yeah, and then we had a branch of Newport Construction, a painting arm in there for a little bit.
So that all going away? and
Yeah,
just-
but at the point in time when we're through some of the different permitting, there's a manufacturing period where there won't be any sales. So again, this is all medical use, so when I use the word retail, it doesn't mean adult use or recreational, but there will be a retail use as well for medical use. And at the point in time when that is approved, there won't be any other uses on the property. Will be the sole.
It's not a growing facility, or it is?
It will be, yeah,
It
it'll
will
be
be.
co-located, but it's considered a tier one. It's relatively small by a lot of the standards.
Sure,
We're in a small community, and that was one of the reasons we selected West Bridgewater, is because the zoning bylaws don't allow more than 10,000 square feet, so that
Mhm.
accommodates our small business model with respect to the cannabis business.
gotcha.
John?
Are you owning the property or leasing it?
We're in a lease. Yep, it's a 10-year lease with 2 5-year options. And
Okay.
so we intend on being there for a minimum of 20 years. And good relationship with Mr. Plassi and the town at this point, so try to be there as long as we can.
Did you get your DEP file number yet?
We got one of them, and we have reached out to Bernadette to see why they haven't issued the second.
So you have the one for the site itself, the site work. And you don't want to be tied to just one file number so that you can't get a
Yeah.
certificate until all of it's done, and you may not want to do it that way, is that?
Yeah, well, part of it is, and Rob Pellegrini is the attorney for the project, is since the road is owned by the town and the site is owned by Mr. Plassi, it should be 2 filings so that it's
Okay.
separated that way.
So other than those questions, I really don't have any issues with the plans.
Anybody in the audience? Questions, comments? All right. Hearing none, we can close the 163 for the roadway. We have to leave open until the DEP permit
Okay.
comes in. So I will entertain a motion to close 63 Maple Street.
Motion to close?
Moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. I'll entertain a motion to issue a standard order of conditions.
Motion to issue that.
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And I will entertain a motion to continue Maple Street roadway
Until the next.
till
Next
2
meeting?
weeks. We should have it, you think, or you want to?
I think, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, we've been trying.
To the next meeting.
Make the motion to the next meeting.
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you
What's the
very
date on
much.
that meeting?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
What was the date on the next meeting?
The 18th?
Yes.
Well, we appreciate it. We've been working with the town now for a long time, so we've gone slowly through the different boards and, be
It's
available
not too
to you guys.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's slow at this stuff. We appreciate that.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Next, we will have continued public hearing for map 65, lots 4, 6, and 7 Pleasant Street.
Hey folks, my name's Tom Pazerski. I'm a senior project manager for Merrill Engineers, and I represent the applicant who is right here. This is Con McLaughlin from D'Angelo's. Last time we were here, we were asked, we had a last minute request to increase the size of the building. So it's 5,600 square feet. It was 4,000 square feet. It doesn't affect anything with the stormwater. The stormwater exceeds the DEP and general stormwater requirements for the town. I think you're dealing somewhere in the vicinity of 250 to 175 cubic feet of rechargeable water quality, and I think we have over 2,500 cubic feet, so it just sort of blows it out of the water. You can see the project consists of gravel drive, storage area, parking lot, public parking lot area, gravel drive for relocating the sign. We talked about the sign last time, that we had over, I think, 4,000 square feet of replication area. And in this particular area, we're down to 1,525, so we have significantly reduced that. And we also reworked the walking trails throughout here with the public park area. The one item that was asked for was to try to firm up the commitment on behalf of the applicant for the scholarship and the open space area. Connor can talk to that. I know a draft has been presented to John. It probably still needs some work. And John hasn't quite had an opportunity to meet with the town folks to iron the wrinkles out. one of the things though is our client is under the gun from their client to get this taken care of. So we would really appreciate it if we could perhaps have a consideration, have that conditioned. And we are agreeable to what the board suggested, the commission suggested last time, which is to make sure that that is all in place before a building permit is issued.
So, I just need to, the only real material change to what was agreed upon and what I was asking was that we were hoping to tie the benefits to the life of the billboard. As long as the billboard's in operation, the benefits will be. But I believe there was an error, I don't know if I thought that there was a designated amount of time for the benefit of 30 years, and whether the underlying company decides to leave in 20 years or if they stay for 40 years, we want to make that commitment for every year that the board's in operation, as opposed to a designated amount of time.
So if the company, another company took over, it would be in place?
It would be in place, yes. I think it's fair to say, as long as, so the lease I have now, I've already covered, is 20 years.
Sure.
So I can guarantee 20, but or actually from 2014, 20. But
Right.
beyond that, it's really hard for me to.
Sure.
But
And-
as long as it is.
Yeah.
Theoretically, when would it be effective? For like this school year, do you think, or next school year?
As soon as it's erected, which we should be able to get it hopefully by September, so it'll be beginning of next school
Pretty
year.
fast, yeah.
Yeah. if everything's-
That's all I had.
John, anything?
No, that was, I've reviewed the revision of the plan, and that's pretty, it's all set there. And the only question I have was that we had an agreement or as you may recall, we didn't have a building on the site. It was just going to be moving the billboard sign itself.
Right.
And we had an agreement in place, and I reached out to Connor about it, and he had some reservations. He wanted to come this evening to talk about what he just did. And so I spoke to town administrator and in the Board of Selectmen's office, and I believe that the original agreement is still in place, but if we have to do some rewriting of an agreement based on some new information, then we may have to do that. But I guess what I'm saying is that we're going to have to put a condition in that we won't allow any, and Tom just said it himself, that it has to all be agreed upon before they can start construction. So all that minor type of thing that Connor's talking about, well, it's not minor when you talk about
Yeah,
the
it's only
long term,
length of-
but
it's only the length of time. That just.
so I don't have an issue at this point, as long as we can put a condition that nothing is constructed until final agreement is reached.
Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close.
Moved in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to issue an order of conditions with the added stipulation of the construction requirement.
I'll make that motion.
Moved in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
50-foot. 50
Thank
foot
you.
waiver.
And I will entertain a motion to grant a waiver of the 50-foot.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Moved in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's what we needed. Thanks, Frank. I meant to ask that before.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna have it. Thanks for looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment? Can I make a comment? Yeah. I was just mentioned to the audience that you may or may not know that some of that discussion involved a commitment from these people putting the sign up for a $10,000 scholarship every year at the high school. which is a pretty sizable amount to, I believe the only stipulation is an environmental major in college, and it's at least a 20-year commitment, maybe longer. So, thought that was pretty good.
All right, next we have 173 Turnpike Street.
Good evening, Joshua Borden, on behalf of my client Richard Hemingway, Arthur Borden and Associates. When we were here last 2 weeks ago, we had John wanted some mitigation done for this site for the intrusion into the 100-foot inner riparian. Since that time, we've had a chance to sit down with John. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to move the shed outside of the 100-foot inner riparian, and the second suggestion that John came up with is a conservation restriction / easement over everything that's inside of that 100-foot inner riparian, so no work can ever be done ever again in that, other than the little bit of area that's being used for the building of the building.
And the 100-foot is what, the pink?
That is the 75. The 100-foot is right here for the.
Pretty much everything that's outlined in orange will be the
Yeah.
conservation easement restriction.
Posted? Will it be posted?
Can you point out where the posts were moved?
Wait a minute.
So essentially, they were
Yeah.
moved to the 100-foot buffer from the river.
There's gonna be
riverbank.
one. There's gonna be one here, one at the corner of the garage, and one up in the back corner of the lot.
There just isn't a lot of room for the owners to walk around or...
They're fine with it. So
Only other thing I might mention or ask, is there any need for plantings or enhancements where the shed area was, if you're gonna be removing any of that as part of, I mean,
We're willing
If
to
the-
plant whatever, if there is a need.
Wouldn't be that
Kind of
much.
thought that by restricting everything there. that-
just let it go to...
yeah, it would just
Okay.
go back to its natural state. So
So that little corner with the building that's gonna be is the garage.
right here.
Yep. There's not gonna be any room at all to do anything behind that.
There's maybe like 2 or 3 feet.
Yeah, but you're gonna be in the
Paint.
100-foot area.
Yeah,
Yeah, because the 100. Yeah,
but it'll.
The
But I'm just
conservation-
saying, after it's all done,
It'll
Yeah.
kick out around it.
the conservation agent will kick off
Oh, it's gonna kick
around
out
the
around
building
that,
about 2 or 3 feet.
So when you say nothing can ever be built in there, could it anyway?
Well, they could come back with another request to put a pool in or something, I mean, so this pretty much ends it for
Ends any
this,
further?
for this owner and any subsequent one.
Yeah, nothing now could be done out here, which I don't think anyone would have any reason to do anything out there.
Right.
It's within your jurisdiction at that point. So
Mhm.
how much room is behind the back of the house?
I don't have a distance back there. I would say, what's the scale on this plan? Is it a 20? Maybe 25 feet.
Is there a deck on the back of the house?
No, there is not.
Is there
The
any
deck
plant?
is off
Is
the
there
side
any?
of the house.
Okay.
So it looks as though there will be some disturbance at the 100, right? While they're doing the garage.
The garage sticks in a little bit.
Yes.
plus,
The 100 foot is right here.
Right.
So we are doing some permanent disturbance inside of the 100 foot.
Right.
The conservation easement then will come out and around, maybe 3 feet off the garage. So they'll have
How
some room
far
to
in do you think you'll be disturbing?
There's what do we have on this here? There is I thought we had it on the plan somewhere.
I mean, just the
25.
normal building, you think it'll be that much? Yeah?
If that.
There's 118 square feet of permanent disturbance inside the 100 foot buffer.
Okay. Permanent disturbance,
permanent disturbance.
nothing beyond that.
Nothing.
Okay.
No,
What's in that area right now? Where,
just some small trees. Not much of anything.
small trees.
John, anything else?
I have no issue.
Anybody else?
No.
Anybody in the audience? Hearing no more comments, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close?
Second.
Moving seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to allow the work to be done with an order of conditions and the waivers.
Actually,
Make
before we do that, I do have a question. How far back does that property go? Do they own?
They own right to the fence, right here. They only own
That's right.
25 feet back behind the house.
So
There's
all
no-
the way back? No, I mean, all the way back, how far do they go back from, the street
From the street?
You mean into the wetlands?
into the wetlands? You own any of the wetlands?
Yeah, oh yeah, they own all the way.
They own all
All
that?
of
This, the whole thing to here is,
Yeah, this is
Here.
the parcel where,
So I know, yeah, all right, so the rest of that can't be touched.
yeah, none of this can ever be touched without coming to you people and begging and pleading, and I don't think that's ever gonna happen, so.
Say never.
Well, it has a restriction on it now.
No,
Or it will.
that ends it, yeah.
That ends it.
Yeah.
And, we've drawn up the paperwork, and I believe that'll be,
Yeah, it's one of the other documents that shows the crosshatch, which will be used as an exhibit for the conservation restriction.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
thank you, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have 55 South Street, stormwater management permit. Anybody here?
All right, rather than tabling this, this gentleman filed for his building permit. I alerted the building department that he needed to submit a stormwater application with the commission. We published the hearing in the paper. The gentleman owes the commission some money. We've made a number of calls to his phone that he has on his application. I emailed the gentleman this afternoon and said that he needs to get a hold of me as soon as possible. He has not, so I'm inclined to say to open the hearing and deny the permit, but rather than doing that, I need a vote to allow me to issue a cease and desist on his building permit. He's got wood going up on a foundation. We acquiesced to allow him to get a start with good faith that he was going to follow through on this process, and he hasn't. So I will issue a cease and desist, and rather than having you deny his permit, because I think the permit is worthy.
He's the same developer on the other parcel beside it that already has the house, correct?
Right.
I was hoping he was going to show up because I have a couple questions about the development and the use of ATVs through the wetland area on his parcels that he's developing. So I would,
By him?
I don't know by who, but I know the ATVs have been out there and had mudded and rutted it up pretty good at one point in the wetland area that's supposed to be having the markers put up and the protections put there.
That was new construction, too.
Yeah, it was after the new construction started that it looks like a bunch of dirt bikes or ATVs had some fun.
We'll go with the cease and desist.
I will entertain a motion to issue the cease and desist.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
And continue to the
And
18th.
I'll entertain a motion to continue till the 18th.
Motion.
Second.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And next we have Scotland Maple Street, notice of intent. Driscoll Engineering, continued public hearing.
Before you do that, I just want to clarify the cease and desist. The length of the cease and desist will run until he gets his permit from this commission?
Yes. And fees paid.
And what?
And the fees paid.
And the fees, okay. All right, thank you. All right, the purpose of this being on the agenda was that it was continued from the last hearing so that I could give you an update on our meeting with the 53G that we hired to review the drainage. So we had a meeting with the developer, the engineer, 2 engineers from the company that the commission hired, and me. And the 53G had a chance to look over the plans because I sent them as a means for them to work up an estimate. And they immediately saw that there weren't the required number of test pits dug in the stormwater basins that have been designed. They're so long that they may have 1 test pit in it and maybe 1 somewhere close by, but not enough to be able to establish the groundwater in the stormwater basins. And the reason why that's important is that they have to keep a certain clearance above the water table with the bottom of the basin, because we don't want a pond out there. We want it to drain through and recharge. And as it turns out, if they have to raise it because the groundwater table was improperly determined, of course that affects everything back up gradient on that drain system to the far end, and that means more fill that would be required. They also looked at some of the geometry of where catch basins were placed and where they were not placed, and how that might impact overflow during a heavy rainfall. So it came out in the discussion that the requirement for designing the street drainage is a 25-year storm. And of course, not ours, but the wetland regulations requires a design for a 100-year storm. So if you're designing the street drainage, piping, catch basins, etc., to capture the 25-year storm, what happens to the 50 and the 100-year storm? It overflows. And so the 53G discovered that there didn't seem to be any forethought on it as to what would the impact be if it started to pond in the street and overtop the curbing, the Cape Cod curb or berms along the side of the road, and how it would affect abutters or some of the lots within the development. So the 53G asked the engineer to submit plans and calculations to show how they were going to deal with that. Let me back up to the test pits. None of the test pits were witnessed by me, and I'm real conservative about determining where water tables are to the benefit of the environment and not to the benefit of a developer. So oftentimes I get into arguments with engineers trying to establish where the high groundwater is, and that's determined by the color of the soil, from the oxidation in the soil, that kind of thing, the depletion of color, the concentration of colors. That all tells you where the water table is. So I pointed out to the developer and his engineer that they're going to have me come out with them when they do some additional tests, and that we're not going to accept just the engineer's report. Getting back to the drainage itself, they had concerns about the shallowness of the swale that runs along the back of the Scotland Street abutters property. And they feel that there wasn't enough information shown on the plans to adequately determine what is the carrying capacity of that swale as it takes it from the upper end of it down to the stormwater basin. And they also pointed out that we need groundwater determinations throughout that whole swale system. So, let's see, there was other discussions about the lack of information showing how the access road to the leaching field that sits out on the mound closest to the river, and what the impact of the construction of that would be on the wetlands. Even though they're proposing a replication area, they want some more information shown on the plans of how that road is going to be mucked out, filled back in, that kind of thing. There wasn't enough information on there. So the net result of that is that they don't anticipate they being the developer and the engineer, they don't anticipate getting all of that information back to the 53G until February 21st, at which time the 53G reviewer will start the review. They aren't going to look at the plans as they're drawn right now because everybody can agree that they're not adequate yet. And as soon as we get the additional information, which they're anticipating by the 21st, then they'll start their review. So the initial report from the 53G won't be until the 17th of March, or be ready for our meeting on the 17th. Does that work out on your calendar?
Yep, that's what I was opening up to see.
All right, and so that would be the first review. And let's assume that they get it done a couple of days before our meeting. Even if the engineer were able to turn around those plans and address the review letter, it won't be enough time for the 53G to say, yes, everything's been taken care of. So I anticipate it will be continued at least one more time after the 17th. But that will be the first meeting that we will get the nuts and bolts from our reviewer as to what needs to be done on this plan. As the test pits are dug out there, and if they do have me witness them, and if they don't, they are going to be out of luck. But if they don't, but if they do, I'll be able to provide feedback to anyone, any of the abutters, any of the commission members as to what we've been finding.
Is there a certain amount of test pits that are supposed to be on a project like this?
Well, they've done a considerable amount of testing out there way back at least 2 years ago or so. There was test pits dug when they decided that let's stop doing test pits on the land that's going to be developed, and let's put the septic system out on the mound because that's the best soil out there. It was gravelly and sandy. And so, of course, that now is no longer in play because of the DEP's review and all of the restrictions that DEP has put on the development due to the groundwater mounding calculations and the issues that DEP found. So the developers come back and dug a whole series of test pits and have discovered that pretty much Phase 1, which is where you go in on Maple Street, and the immediate lots in that area will all go over to the mound because the soils in that area are not very good. And so in order to make a septic system, it probably is not worth trying to do it on site. It's better to put it out into the mound. I'll call it the mound. The other areas north of Maple Street in the Phase 2 and 3 are going to be shared systems, and they've done some test pits and they found that are at least acceptable enough to warrant putting common and shared systems for some of those units. And that, they've done a lot of test pits on. I haven't seen any of it. The 53G asked to have all the test pit data submitted. But my plan is when they call to have me come out to do the swales along the back of the property and in the stormwater basins, is to ask for more test pits to be dug so that I can check out some of those results that were turned in, because if I don't like those, I'm gonna make sure the Board of Health hears about it. And if the developer squawks because I'm asking him to do test pits that aren't needed, then I'll say, oh well, and let them complain to you people. But they need to be able to demonstrate to everyone, you, me, the abutters, the residents, that there is good information to design by, and that the information is correct and the designs are correct. Otherwise, we're not doing our job.
How many did they want in the beginning of this? Units, they wanted like 108,
Over
right?
100. I don't know the exact number, but
They want
over.
townhouses too, along with individual residences.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, John, because water management is really the bottom line to our residents, there's no doubt about that. I'm a little puzzled as to how it took a 53G to find out that there weren't enough test pits in that.
Because they just want to get it done.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know what I mean. And secondly, that the design was to 25-year instead of 100.
Yeah.
And I'm not a civil engineer, but I know that much. We got to do it to 100.
And even 100's not even good enough these
yeah.
days.
So,
But that's, folks, is why we have this 53G, the independent engineer, not connected to any of us, to look at these things. See, so it's to everyone's benefit that he's there.
so in the scenario that I pointed out with the 25-year
Yeah.
design, your typical catch basin grate has these small squares
Yeah.
in it. And the general rule of thumb is that that amount of area of holes in the catch basin grate totally can handle 1.4 cubic feet per second.
Okay.
Now, in a 100-year storm, the 1.4 cubic feet per second going through into that grate isn't going to work. And so it tends to flood and pond in the roadways, and that's why a lot of times on our streets you see these big puddles or flooding adjacent to it.
Sure.
The 53G is going to, because we can't make them do anything more than what the town's minimum requirement is, and that's, the minimum requirement is 25
Oh, it is. Minimum.
for the planning board.
Minimum,
And that's
yeah.
all they have to design by. However, they can't get by the fact that if it's going to flood, if it's going to pond, if it's going to run at a fast velocity off of the street system and onto abutting land, into the wetlands, into the storm basins, and create, because of the velocity, erosion,
Overruns.
gullying, flooding, they have to deal with that. And they can't say, oh, well, that's not required. It definitely will be required. So that's why I think the 53G pointed out that even though you can design by the 25, you have to look at what happens beyond it.
Sure.
And we all know that it seems like we've been getting big storms
Just
right
gonna
after
say
one
that.
right after
Just
another.
gonna say, we're
And
inching more and more towards these 100-year events.
some of it's blamed as climate change. Others are just saying that the cycle of the Earth, the years, are the cause of it. Whatever the science is, or no science, or however anybody wants to call it, it's obvious that there are things happening,
Yeah.
and we have to look at it. So that's the summary of it. There's nothing new to review at this point. I will endeavor to keep all the abutters updated as to what's going on. We formed a group email so that whenever I put one out, it goes out to all of the interested abutters that have asked to be on it. And we'll keep doing that. I'll keep the commission informed. But the next milestone is the 21st, where the 53G will get the information, and then their reports will get to us sometime before our March 17th meeting.
I figured there'd be some questions.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Yep.
Are you saying that the test pits out back weren't witnessed by anybody in the town, or just not by you?
Not by me. No, they could have been.
Do we know if they were witnessed by anyone in the town? Because isn't that a requirement for those?
Yes, the requirement is that if they're going to use them for the septic, it has to be reviewed or witnessed by the Board of Health agent here in town.
And so we know that that was done?
I presume.
We presume, so we don't know for sure.
But regardless, if they're okay with it for septic purposes, I'm not necessarily
Right.
okay for drainage purposes.
Okay.
You could check with the Board of
Just
Health.
clarification, this is an initiation of a new 40B project or a revision to the previous project?
So it is a revision, but the process is that they get initial approval for sometimes an incomplete engineer design site plan. And so they go and they follow through with the other boards, which is primarily just us because of the comprehensive permit process. It really puts all of the decision-making on the zoning board and their consultants who review for them.
They've already had to ask to get an extension to the initial one. They've gone
Right.
beyond the
Right.
deadline for that.
And they got, I think they got it, though.
Well, of course they can. My other question is there a revision to the joint septic and disposal system, or are they now looking to put individual septic to each residential lot?
So the original plan is to put all of the flows from all of the units out into what I call the mound.
Right, there's a wastewater treatment.
So they had to have a wastewater treatment plant. In order to do that, they have to meet groundwater standards through the DEP's permitting process. And so they were going to have a sewage treatment plant and then pump stations to get it out there. And in the review by DEP, they required groundwater mounding calculations and determined that the mound below the leaching field would be too close to meet the Title V requirements. And therefore, they had to reduce the flow to get that mound to come back down. And by reducing the flow meant losing units.
Right. So they've halved it.
So they, between the delays by DEP reviewing and making their decisions and the loss of units, the developer decided to go back to a number of shared systems that will be done through the local Board of Health because they'll be below the 10,000 gallons per day threshold that would kick in DEP's approval. And so they're now going to deal just with the local Board of Health. And so every system will be just under 10,000 gallons per day.
Right. Previously, this 40B, because this is cited in a priority habitat, it was submitted to NHESP. They were unable, from my understanding, to get a conservation management permit for this project. Do you know if they have resubmitted to the NHESP for review of this site to see if there's a taking, because it was the Blandings hurdle? And basically, one of the key reasons is they never submitted, to my understanding, an application for a conservation management permit, meaning they didn't meet the requirements and they knew that it was going to fail. So do you know where that stands?
Yes, I talked with the people just yesterday because we now own the land that the conservation management plan would pertain to. And that hasn't been finalized yet, but it is in a stage that will be approved once it's finalized. So you're correct, it hasn't been issued yet, but it has been applied for, and it's pending based on some additional information. And we're going to kind of throw a wrench into it because the commission, the town wants the model airplane club to exist out there, and the turtle nesting habitat that was going to be constructed as part of this requirement for the take of the landing turtles habitat required a place to do it, and the developer decided it was going to be on the model airplane club land. Well, since then, we now own it because it had to be given to some type of conservation body, an agency, to keep it into conservation restricted land. So it was either a land trust or local Concom, and we took it. We accepted it. And now we don't want them to build that turtle nesting habitat such that it will force the airplane club out of there. We feel they're providing a good service by being overseers of the land so that people don't go down and dump mattresses, garbage, whatever. So we don't know how that's going to pan out, but the guy I spoke to yesterday who's going to issue the CMP, the Conservation Management Plan, doesn't seem to feel that's a problem if we have the developer redesign that turtle nesting habitat to another spot.
So, just final question. There seems to be a second application under Mesa review that was recently filed in January, number 20-39144. And it appears to apply to this particular project. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay.
But I now will look into it. Thank you.
Anybody else, any comments, questions? Yes.
I get two. Of course I do. All right, number one, I'm still a little confused. Had they asked for any variances? Like, so in previous, when residents come in, they ask, for variances. And I'm just curious if they've asked for any variances where we've had to, where the commission is going to allow them to do something that strictly in our regulations you would not allow. So that's what kind of where I'm a little confused, because like you're talking about where like if they go into the wetlands, they have to make sure that they do an equal amount of reparation, so to speak, right?
Well, at this point, because it's a 40B, our jurisdiction is only under the state wetland bylaw, or its regulations. Our local bylaw is exempt. So the 50-foot no-touch doesn't come into play.
Okay.
Any of the replications, variances to do work within that 50-foot is off the table.
Okay.
So all we're looking at is the state statutes that we have to make sure they maintain.
Okay. And then the second question I have is about the road. So when they submit those plans for review, is that going to contain the actual dimensions of the road within the 33-foot setback with where they're lining that road? Are they going to get into that detail? Because it wasn't in the original plans, and I really couldn't tell from the update if the schematics of the road were going to be included in that. Because there's like that 33-foot, and are they going to center the road so that the abutter, do you know what I mean? Or are they shifting it one way to the other within that 33 feet?
So during my meeting, I asked the question because I had a lot of the emails from the abutters with me, and I brought that up, and they are talking about trying to work around some trees that are on private property, and I'm not mentioning any names, but there's some trees on private property.
There's only one in butter.
I know.
And that's me.
Yeah, I know.
Jane Poe,
So you can
140
mention the
Scotland
name.
Street, 71 Maple. But regardless of my trees that are on my private property, I'm still, I want to know if there's, like we normally do with a town road, are they centering the road within their 33 feet?
My review of that is that they have done that, and
Okay.
that they are still trying to figure out a way to try to work around some trees that are out there. But to be honest with you, from my experience, that when you carve out the unsuitable soil that makes up Maple Street right now, since it's a cart road, and they bring in good base fill and put blacktop on it, that it's gonna have some effect on the root systems of those abutting trees.
Right.
The 53G pointed out that the entrance road into this development on Maple Street has not too much drainage that is going to capture water going into Scotland Street. And the engineer pointed out it's only a short section of roadway and that there's not much runoff coming from there, but I believe that the 53G will be, with my encouragement, looking at ways to capture that water so that it doesn't run off onto the abutting properties. And I mentioned that right in the meeting, and we'll just make sure that we do as much as we can to prevent that.
As it comes onto Scotland, you mean?
Right.
But right now it pools at the bus stop.
So we don't want that.
Yeah.
And if we can get that back into the drain system, then, and they may have to do some work in Scotland Street itself.
Mhm. Okay.
At this point, they weren't proposing it, but when we get done reviewing, they may have to do that. I did bring up and mentioned about the huge rock outcropping on Scotland Street. That's right on the edge of the pavement. And the developer will be taking that out of there, either jackhammering it or removing it if it's not too big, so that it's no longer a safety issue. But we're going to make sure that if he's working in Scotland Street to do that, that he takes care of some other drainage issues.
Can you explain the rock outcropping? What do you mean?
You know, the one that's painted orange?
The what?
The pink road.
Oh, yeah.
Halfway down orange.
Spray painted it. That's, okay.
You take your eye off the road for a second and you hit it.
Yeah, I was thinking Maple with Scott, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? No?
So is the 53G recommendation that the 53G comes up with, is that going to be seriously looked at
Oh,
by the
sure,
developers?
sure.
Or is it going to be looked at just by you?
So if the 53G tells the commission that they don't like something, the developer has to change it.
Okay.
Now, I suppose they could appeal it, but it's a long process. So I don't think, my experience is that unless we're really asking something outlandish, that they're going to do what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is it's got to be done right.
How many times can you appeal?
Does that include less houses?
I don't know. I'm sorry?
Would that include less houses?
I don't know, we can't do that, but,
Well, they've already gone down from 100, so.
and that's the zoning board, and
Yeah.
they do have to go back to the zoning board after we're done with it, because the plans will be modified to the extent that it's different than what they originally approved, so they have to go back for that final approval.
Because didn't he say when he was here last time, or 2 times ago maybe, that he had all his final approvals from the zoning board? I believe he said he had his
Yeah, he
final
did.
approvals.
Yeah.
So that was confusing to me because I thought the plans don't seem done, and yet he's saying he has final approvals. But they're not final? I mean, is that,
No, I think he has to get their final approval
Okay.
on the plan that this,
okay,
It's
because I was
been-
confused when he said it. I thought, how in the world can they get final
think
approval
what he-
when it's not done?
I think what he meant was, for the original plan that was submitted, he had all his approvals for that plan. But being that it's a
Okay.
revised plan,
Okay.
it backs the whole process
Okay,
up.
it was just confusing to me when he said it.
But
Okay.
he never got state approval to finish that project. He only got a comprehensive permit from the town.
right. So, you want to elaborate a little?
Comprehensive permit, basically, as mentioned earlier, it's an affordable housing program where you can put and allay certain zoning requirements so that more housing can be put in. So long as 1/4 of it goes to affordable housing, you're granted certain dispensations, if you will. That just means that the town's control is limited. And once it goes through the zoning board, they can grant what's called a comprehensive permit. So instead of going board by board by board by board, everybody gets their input, they get a comprehensive permit, it's good for 3 years, it's been more than 3 years, you can ask for an extension, they got an extension. That plan was originally set for 89 houses, individual ones jammed onto very small parcels. Once you get your comprehensive permit, you have to meet certain state requirements as well through the Department of Environmental Protection. There's water is usually the key thing for drainage and runoff and all that stuff. So if you can't get it approved through the final state, you can't build even if you have your town approval. So that's where he finds himself, which is why he's reduced from 89 to 44. And then he'll probably just keep slugging away until he can finally build something. Or it gets reduced so much and it's no longer worth his dollar.
So is it actually 44 houses or just 44 buildings?
Houses. There are 44
Units.
individual
Because I thought it was a
Units.
section of...
Units.
Yes.
There are 44 units, some of them are multiple.
Well, they're individual residences.
Aren't some
Right.
of them duplexes?
Some of them.
Yeah,
do
it's
like-
92 units.
I was gonna say, I thought it was
Yeah,
92,
right.
like 92 dwellings altogether, or 92 families. And, but it's,
So some of them are duplexes, so it could be 44. I didn't
which is
count.
what, all the plans, all the agendas and stuff say 44, which is kind of confusing because it's actually
I think it's 44 lots.
lots. Some of them are duplexes.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new plan, so.
Yeah,
I
so
thought
I think it's
33 of them were
Yeah.
duplexes, which got us to 66, plus then the individual
Yeah, I think it's
lots.
92
And-
altogether.
Right.
Because originally it was
120, I think.
2-bedroom and
started.
3-bedroom houses, which was the
Right.
89.
Right.
So now they've gone back and they're doing duplexes
Yes.
to
So
try. and-
there's 92 altogether, 92 I believe was the
There's
last number.
individual homes for section 1, and then duplexes for section 2 and 3.
Ah. Thank you.
A question on the 40B, this project's gonna be in phases.
Yes.
Can you put the 40Bs all in the last phase?
No.
No, but it's heavily loaded on the second and third phase, and
Yeah.
the first phase has only a few affordables.
What if they just do the first phase and then stop?
It's a good question. So I don't know if the zoning board has the right to say you have to put all of them in one phase or, the first phase. So I don't know if that would fly, but that's a zoning board decision, not the commission.
I know where I live across from the golf course, that development in there, that's a 40B. And you cannot isolate the 40Bs. That's against the law to do that. So it's sprinkled in, it's worked fine in our neighborhood.
You'd never know it.
Same
No.
across.
Well, it's just a matter of what they end up getting charged at the houses.
Well, that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's what makes the 40B aspect so appealing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I'm not
and
saying there
they
isn't.
can construct the pro formas any way they want, and the way that, they're supposed to be a nonprofit organization that's building them. But if they don't meet their numbers, then Mass Housing gets involved, because usually Mass Housing is the one that initially grants the approval to pursue a 40B. And if they don't hit the numbers for lower income housing, then they lose their certain status and other mechanisms kick in. So,
Just as an FYI, on his proposed plans currently that are out there, Phase 1 has 13 units, 2 affordable. Phase 2, 24 units, 7 affordable. Phase 3, 25 units, 8 affordable. Phase 4, 30 units, 6 affordable. So So.
And how did the individual units break down? Is that easily?
He does have what type of, whether it's duplexes or single, broken down within those numbers.
And that affordable number varies according to
Yeah.
the size of the house. You know, it could be very small place, so it's less, or so on and so forth.
So if he was to do just phase one and walk away, you're getting 13 units, 2 of them affordable, and then he walks away. If that's only what he's gonna end up doing.
And if you notice the number, each one, it's approximately 1/4 of what he's building. So that satisfies.
There it is, yeah.
So,
And if John has sent you the plans, I think it's second page in possibly, it shows them on the plan highlighted in red, so you can actually see where they're placed or intended to be placed, if you're curious for where any of those are.
And that's on what plan?
The set of plans that were submitted the first meeting, and it's 1, 2, yeah, second page has them on it.
I had a question about drainage. It's gonna drain into the wetlands, correct? Which then flows into the river. Aren't there different regulations with the river being involved?
So they're outside the river, what we call the riverfront.
Right,
So-
directly.
Yeah, they're not subject to any of those requirements, but the DEP stormwater regulations requires pre-treatment, recharge, and a reduction of suspended solids that are in every storm, solids are picked up by the rainwater flowing down along the gutter lines, and so they have to demonstrate all of those requirements. So theoretically, it's been treated before it goes out into the wetlands. So the way that this is designed is to do a lot of recharge through the bottom of the basin, and that's why it's important to know where the water table is, because if it's in the water table, you're getting no recharge, or very little. They have to meet all of the stormwater quality standards that are in the DEP stormwater regulations, and our 53G will make sure that that happens.
Okay. I just thought there was another requirement if it's going to make its way into the river, which it does. But maybe I'm wrong.
But it's far enough away.
Well, if it was being discharged within, let's say, the riverfront area, they're probably, and if the water was an outstanding quality water, which the town river is, and it's got some issues.
Sure.
So it's not considered a pristine water, so there's lesser requirements on that than there is for an outstanding water source.
Any other questions?
So the next meaningful meeting is the end of March.
Yes.
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily mean things aren't going to be happening, and so if you want to get on that group email and you aren't already on it, email me and I'll put you right on it. And that way, every time I send anything out, everybody is aware of what's happening.
I believe it's also on the agenda for the selectmen tomorrow as well.
That's what I've heard.
So if you want to check the website for the selectmen calendar.
Just one other quick question. The monitoring wells have been out there for 5 years or so that no one's touched. Does that play any part of this at all? or-
Were most of those on the mound?
Most, but there's 4 of them just north of Maple Street that look like they haven't been touched in years.
So the ones out on the mound were probably crucial for DEP's
Right.
groundwater mounding analysis and to verify the engineer's calculations, those kind of things. So I don't know why the other ones were put in north of Maple Street.
Yeah,
because
they did it at the same time, but they, might be worth opening up.
Thanks for pointing it out, because I'll ask for any of the data that they have on it to see if we can verify water tables.
Okay.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to continue this to our March 17th meeting.
Make the motion.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So keep an eye on the website and the agenda. Should be March 17th, but depending on 53G schedule, and they're going back out to do all these perks that they're going to have to do, we may hit that date, or it may be kicked off even a little further than that.
But we definitely will have a meeting on the
Right, that
17th
night.
to discuss it, and you'll know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same thing, it's an email.
And
There's a name,
Diesel meter.
I knew what you were talking about. Information. I haven't seen it.
Next on our agenda, we have 273 Pleasant Street, release of surety.
Yes, so at our last meeting, you signed the certificate of compliance, and we had required this applicant to deposit with us a sum of money to make sure he asked for a certificate of compliance. So now he's looking to get the money released, and it only can happen if you vote, so. I think what we can do is, I'm hoping, what we can do is, we can show in the minutes that you voted to release it, and we can attach that with a letter to the treasurer, and he will write a check to the individual.
Any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to release the surety for 279 Pleasant Street.
make the motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. I will pass this around as a save the date. The Massachusetts Open Space Conference is April 25th.
Greenfield Community College, that's a commute.
It's
It's a
always
little bit
out
of a
that
ride.
way, isn't it? Of course, there are other people in the state besides us, when you think about it. Forget beyond 495.
And we have office supply bill.
All right.
And other than that, I think that's it,
It is.
unless anybody has anything else. Hearing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Moving and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.